Bonjour. Hello, everybody. My name is Benji Rogers. I'm extremely excited to have on the panel with us today Isaac Bess. I'm going to say this wrong. Daniel Anstandig and Michael Addicott. We are going to be discussing the Me generation, 4 user-driven business models you can learn from. And I think it's 3. 3, yeah. I'll talk about mine in a little bit. Anyway, so my name is Benji Rogers. I founded a company called PledgeMusic about 4.5 years ago. Founded it from an artist perspective, as someone who toured in vans and played gigs all over the world with massive highs and absolutely crushing lows. Had a few record deals. I became obsessed by MySpace just around the time it launched, and I'm not obsessed with it anymore. So we've moved on from there. My company, PledgeMusic, really focuses on the engagement aspect of an artist's life and how they engage directly with fans. I would say that I want to run things pretty informally here. I don't normally moderate stuff, so if you guys have questions and girls have questions, please just raise your hand and let's address them as we go along. We'll also allow time for questions at the end. Yeah, I would love to go down the line here and introduce yourself and tell us what you do, and yeah, that'd be great.
I get to go first.
Yeah, go for it.
Well, I'm Michael Addicott. I manage the curation team at Pandora. Our primary responsibility is to build a really awesome library of music and comedy for personalized radio. We do this in a few different ways, but we kind of go out there and proactively find as much music as we can. We also leverage relationships with labels and artists and managers and distributors to set up delivery of music and comedy. And one of the things we also curate are genre stations. They're a little, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with how Pandora works, but...
Should we show a show of hands? How many of you know how Pandora works?
Okay. Well, on Pandora, it's personalized radio, so you can start, the first sort of level of personalization is beginning your listening experience or your musical adventure by typing in a music or an artist or a song that you like or would like to explore more music like that. You can also type in a genre and you can start it that way. So that's one of the areas where we curate in addition to sort of all the things that go into the library and the relationships that go around that. So.
And you don't consider yourself a streaming service, but an internet radio service, correct?
Technically, we are a radio service.
Radio service.
Not a streaming service.
So you can't go track by track. You have to you enter one and.
Yeah, it's technically called a non-interactive service. So you can't tell us what to play and when to play it. You can tell us kind of the kind of music you would like to hear, and we'll create a playlist based on that. So
great.
That's me in a nutshell. I'll pass it on.
I'm Daniel Anstandig with LDR Interactive. We're a software company based in the U.S. We work with radio stations around the world to put listeners in control of a live broadcast. And I actually brought a couple of quick slides here to show you that just kind of explain who we are and what we do.
Great.
So on the screen, there we go. We have a number of we have a number of systems that are on the air with broadcasters around the world where listeners can vote and control what happens on the air. For instance, across Canada, we have a number of radio stations where listeners can choose which songs play next on the air. They can find new music. Local bands can upload their songs for submission to a local radio station, and then that station can ultimately play that music on the air. We track the way that listeners enjoy their music on a local radio station. We work with 300 stations and networks around the world, so we're on in virtually every major city. There's 1 or 2 radio stations that put listeners in this kind of democratic position. So one of our features is called Instant Alerts, where listeners can sign up for an email, text, or tweet whenever one of their favorite songs are about to play. That's one way that we can track loyalty to a particular artist or a song. We also...
So do they have to come to a platform to sign up for this alert?
They do. They go to the station's mobile app or the station's website. And all of our systems are white labeled so that they're typically named after the radio station. So LDR is our company that powers the technology, but ultimately it's typically known as the radio station brand name.
Got it.
We have a mobile app that we released over this last year called Groover that's used by a number of major broadcasters in the US and Canada, where listeners can control what happens on the air, they can submit music, they can send their own voice to the radio station for consideration, and they can earn badges whenever they vote a number of times for a particular artist or a particular song. And the badges have been interesting to us because this is our way of rewarding interaction with a particular artist or song on a radio station, which is typically a curation of anywhere from 400 to sometimes 1,800 songs. And so with a badge, listeners vote for a particular artist, then they, based on their number of votes or their interaction, how many times they've listened to that artist on that station or on a stream in that station app, they win badges that are really just for the honor of being able to brag to a friend that they were that level of fan. But we've seen that users who win 2 or more badges related to a favorite artist exceed average time spent listening by over 3 times. So we can see that music fans and social music fans in particular drive media usage. And we've seen that radio stations that have more instant alerts or more music fans who vote and control what happens on the air ultimately far exceed in time spent listening radio stations that don't have social music fans as part of the process. So in terms of democratizing the music curation process, which I know is a topic today, we see that as a powerful future for media in general. And that's just a quick summary of who we are and what we do, but we work with stations around the world and in all different kinds of music formats and genres, so we're excited to be a part of the panel today. This is just real quickly here, and then I'll stop on the slides, but one thing we do notice is that social music fans online are typically 5 to 7 years younger than a radio station's broadcast audience. So if we compare radio stations that have a large following of 25 to 34-year-olds, for instance, their social music fans are typically concentrate 5 to 7 years younger. So they may be 18 to 28. And we've seen that on a fairly consistent basis regardless of the format, whether it's classic rock or top 40.
Awesome. Thank you.
That was cool. My name is Isaac Bess. I do business development for YouTube. That involves licensing content from record labels and distributors, as well as other strategic partnerships. I can elaborate on YouTube if anybody would like.
Can we ask around the room here? So how many people in here are artists themselves? And how many people are managers? Labels? Okay, so a good mix there. And again, please, if you do have questions, please do reach out because we want to answer your questions and not just hopefully talk too much. Can I ask a question of all 3 of you here? How do you guys use your own platforms? Do you feel that you as users of them, like so when you're listening to Pandora, when you're, do you vote on stuff that you want to see on a radio station? How do you consume content on YouTube? How do you use them as someone who sees the inside of it? Do you drink your own Kool-Aid and say this is the way of the future? Start with you down there, please, sure. Isaac.
I mean, I definitely drink our Kool-Aid. YouTube is a pretty, let's say, peerless platform for the consumption of music and of any other sort of content. I think that we do a pretty good job of surfacing up recommendations specifically around music, although I think that there's room for improvement. It's something that we're always working to get better at. But I mean, I use YouTube as my primary means of consuming digital music, for sure.
Music?
Yeah.
Yeah. And how about other forms?
Some other forms. I mean, I don't, let's say. How else do I use YouTube? I mean, I think I'm susceptible to the same sort of viral video phenomenon as any other healthy Facebook.
And when you consume music, is it through videos or is it through audio only, or both?
It's largely through video. So, and I'm not sure that my personal tastes in music are necessarily indicative of an average YouTube user in any particular territory. So I tend to dig deep on obscurities because I'm old and have weird interests. But I think for many of our users, we're a video platform, and that consumption is driven by the desire for video, for sure.
Daniel?
Well, we have a group of about 20 music geeks and tech geeks on our team, and so we consume music in all kinds of ways. We definitely consume our own Kool-Aid for sure, but we also use Pandora, we use YouTube, we use RDO, Slacker, 100 other platforms. I think we're fairly non-denominational in our consumption. And I think most consumers are. They want the material. As far as the way that we use our platform,
I was actually more meaning you personally.
Oh yeah. Well,
have you gone on because you generally have heard something? I want to get that alert so that I can know when that's going to happen.
Well, I'm an alternative rock fan, and one of our stations, 97X in Tampa, lets the audience choose every song that plays and choose any new acts that they add to the station.
Gotcha.
So in particular, I enjoy listening to their station through our system because I can vote and control which bands ultimately have a permanent seat on the bus. So that's the way that I typically use it.
Awesome, Mike.
Yeah, I definitely drink the Kool-Aid and drink it often in its variety of flavors. Sometimes it's hard for me to separate sort of when I'm evaluating what's sort of being recommended, what's being put onto playlists, having curated most of the music, or my team having curated most of the music that has gone into the library. It feels good for me to hear it play and to hear that it's connected with people. So. And yeah, it's fun for me to use. I've got 2 little girls at home, so they have their dress-up parties. So we've got music for that. We've got music for cooking. And I've got sort of music for running. And that's one of the things that I really enjoy about Pandora is it's sort of you can take it anywhere, and there's sort of a musical experience for just about every situation you can think of.
And can I ask here, how many people use Pandora in the audience? 2. And how many have used LDR in some way? And YouTube? One of the reasons I was asking this is we were talking just back there about something that all 4 of us have in common, which is that we all still listen to vinyl. We all still have record players, and I believe all of us are record collectors, if I'm not correct. And that leads on to sort of another point here, which is that I guess in the case of YouTube, there's algorithms which will surface content that's relevant throughout it. And with Pandora, you guys have the curation team that will surface the things that you think should be heard, but that's also listener-led by the likes and unlikes, isn't it?
Yeah, and actually we're pretty, almost to the point of, we don't do it at all. We don't actually personally as curators surface music. It's something that the listeners actually do. I haven't mentioned this yet, but when you listen to Pandora, you can thumb up or thumb down a song, and that sort of shapes your personal experience.
But there's certain music that you won't put on Pandora.
Exactly, yeah. Most of the editorial decisions we make happen at the ingestion point. And once the music gets onto Pandora, our listeners become their own tastemakers and their own deciders of what's cool or what's not cool. So we sort of make our editorial decisions, based upon a whole lot of different signals. We even use YouTube as a signal to kind of tell us sometimes what's in demand culturally, sort of what's sort of being surfaced in culture, and that's sort of one of the signals we look at. In addition to sort of the fundamental question of does this music work for personalized radio? Is it going to connect? So.
Because I find it impossible to not play Jack Johnson on Pandora. It's not possible. No matter what combination you put in it, he's right there singing Curious George.
So if you're listening to Glitch Mob,
there was a moment where I was literally like, here he comes. No.
Yeah, well, sometimes we have found it doesn't happen so much anymore, but Pandora's sort of fundamental recommendation engine is based on something called the music genome, which is a musicological taxonomy based upon hundreds of musical traits that music experts go through and score each one of these things and come up with a fingerprint for each song. And early on, when most of our well, almost the entire playlist algorithm was based on musicological matches. We found certain songs sort of were in this musicological sweet spot and would play everywhere. I'm not sure if that's what you were referring to.
It's all good. So as far as curation is something that's kind of a big topic at this point. Curation and discovery, I think, are the two kind of major ones that are talked about. And there's a lot of, obviously, Pandora curates what comes in to the platform. The radio stations that you service curate what comes in to them. And we're talking about giving the listeners a voice and to say, thumbs up, thumbs down, this is what we want. Whereas YouTube is completely open. I mean, pretty much anyone can upload anything as long as it's legal, and even sometimes if it's not, and that has to be policed.
Yes, I mean, the deals that I do with our content partners are on behalf of those users' uploads. So the idea is to identify where copyrighted material has been uploaded by our users or by a partner.
And do comments and that type of thing have anything to do with the surfacing of musical recommendations in that way, or is it purely...
I don't have a great deal of insight into the specifics of how that algorithm works, but there's a ton of data that we amass about the consumption of videos on YouTube, and those recommendations are based largely on that.
Yeah, because one of the things that I find fascinating about this is that, so the question is that if curation is, so we're funneling what comes in your two cases, and we're not in the case of YouTube. And one of the questions that comes up is okay, so curation of it, so there's a certain group of people who decide this is what's going to be listened to, this is what isn't. I know that was a big issue for radio stations for many, many years, whether it was payola or wherever it was. And now you can stack, if you get enough people behind something, you can tip the balance if you want to. Couldn't you just leave your radio station streaming 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and kind of, do things along those lines? And how much control should we give the platform versus the fans, in your opinion?
Well, I think the fans are everything. I mean, I think that one of the fundamental principles that drives all of us is that now in music you don't get discovered, you get momentum. So a band or an artist that really is growing because of a fan base that becomes more and more passionate about it and works for them in propelling their brand name across and their music across multiple platforms. So in our situation, we encourage as little curation as possible with radio stations. And in fact, the more that they try to curate and the more that they try to build rules around what works or doesn't work on the air, regardless of the format, the less it works. The more that they open it up to the fan base, because ultimately they're the people who are consuming the content that's coming back out from that station, the more successful they ultimately are.
And so if I was a band and I wanted to get music on Pandora and I wasn't allowed, how do I,
Glad you brought that up, so I can plug our indie submission system. So we have a system by which artists can submit their music, and we actually have one of our curators evaluate each and every album that gets submitted to us. We get somewhere between 120 and sometimes 150 submissions a week, and we actually listen to every single one. As crazy as that might sound, and give or take, it's around about 50% of them get approved. So it's a pretty good, we call it a radar. So, it's sort of anything that gives us, useful information as to what we should curate into our library, we call a radar. And, this is a great radar for us because we, humbly accept that we can't, build the best, personalized library of music, or best library in the world for personalized music without sort of help from artists, help from our listeners. And so we actually look to our listeners to help us curate in a passive way and also a not so passive way. The not so passive way, listeners can actually email us, and that's another thing that we actually look at every single email and evaluate every single music suggestion that we get, and look at all those. And the passive one is we monitor things that people are searching for on Pandora. And if they sort of reach a certain threshold, that's a signal to us like, oh, this one slipped through the cracks. So in those ways...
So in that case, would you go after that?
Yeah, we would. So...
So you think... So who here has their music up on Pandora, by the way? Who here submitted their music to Pandora? Okay.
We're in Canada.
We are not in Canada yet.
So
Or I should say we're
but you can still put music in from all over the world.
Yes, it needs to be submitted with an active user account. So in order to have a listener ID on Pandora, you need to have a US zip code or Australia, New Zealand zip code. So, you know.
But like CD Baby and TuneCore and the Orchard and all those digital distributors, they put stuff in Pandora, don't they?
Yeah, that they do.
So any Canadian
Could do it. That was the reason I was asking. I'm aware it's not here. I'm just saying, like, wouldn't that be an outlet that everyone here would consider for their music? I'm just wondering why it hasn't. Is there any general why we haven't done that? I'm assuming it. Who's put music up on YouTube? Very few. Well, almost everybody. Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to get to is that so if 70 million user base, I think it is.
Yeah, active.
Yeah, 70 million active users without the artist's music on it. I'm wondering if there's a strategy to why that isn't the case. Throwing it out there. If anyone wants to jump in, then tell it. What's that? Great, good to know. And then, can you talk a little about the YouTube Partners Program? Do you know much about that?
Yeah. YouTube is a pretty open platform, so we have 1 billion users every month. Just going back briefly to your curation question. So we shifted our strategy a couple of years ago to be focused on channel subscription. And so our users are able to subscribe to any channel that they might be interested in, which is a great way to surface up new releases. It's a really important part of how artists and labels can work to grow their YouTube fan base. And we are reliant on both our partners from label and artist perspective, as well as our users to generate the sort of playlists, whether they're album playlists or personal playlists, that can really drive that discovery. So we do relatively little curation on our own. There's not a ton of real estate on YouTube that's allocated by humans. But between our users and our partners and our algorithms, I think we do a pretty good job of surfacing up what we think is a good match. And we're working on it all the time to make that process even better.
Gotcha. And you want to talk about curation? Oh, no, sorry. We covered that one. Apologies.
I can jump in on that. I wanted to mention that one of the ways listeners also sort of curate the listening experience on Pandora is a component of the algorithm is collective intelligence. So, say you've got a Led Zeppelin radio station. If you're new to Pandora and you come there and you start a Led Zeppelin radio station, you're going to hear music that's musicologically similar, and you're also going to hear music that other listeners of Led Zeppelin radio have thumbed up in the past. So the crowd or the collective intelligence sort of gives us a pretty robust list of songs that we're confident work for the majority of the listeners. Now, from there, each individual user personalizes to their own taste, but when you first start, it's a combination of musicological matches and sort of the wisdom of the crowd.
So, a question: how would the people in this room benefit most by using your technologies? Do you think? What strategy would you give to know that we've got artists, managers, labels, and in your case, in Canada? What would you say if you were to say, right, my advice to you today to best leverage our technology is... Go, yeah.
Sure. So I've been in the independent music business for almost 20 years now, and so it's a topic that I take very seriously and feel very personal connection to. I feel like without a doubt, YouTube is the greatest opportunity for independent artists and labels and publishers, for that matter, to reach the largest audience ever. So there's still a great deal of work involved in doing so, but the ability to reach 1 billion users is certainly unprecedented in the music industry. So that's how I suppose.
But so would they upload songs before they're released, songs once they're released? Would it be, you know, pictures with the tracks, full-length videos? What's the sort of nuts and bolts kind of strategy?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of different strategies that labels and artists pursue based on what it is that they want to accomplish. We do a lot of internal research on YouTube-specific success stories, sort of at a high level with Psy and Harlem Shake, to try and understand why our users did what they did, why they watched that video, you know, billions of times. And so the distillation of those sort of best practices can be found at youtube.com/playbook. And as I said, we do a lot of deep dives into the sort of user activity to try and understand what it is that makes people consume music the way that they do on YouTube. I think on a practical level, if you're a band or an artist manager or a publisher, it's a great idea to download that playbook and really dig in. Some of it is sort of very elementary marketing intelligence, like ensure that your thumbnail looks good. But there's some really interesting learnings that we've gleaned over the years, and that's the way to go. I would say it varies pretty dramatically by territory and depending on who you're trying to target. So there's no easy answer like make sure you upload your video 2 weeks before street date or something like that. But there's a lot to learn there.
So what our service does is offer for the music industry and for up-and-coming bands an opportunity to access the megaphone of broadcasting. And for broadcasters, what we offer is an opportunity to access the intelligence of the crowd. So my suggestion to you, if you're looking for greater exposure for your band or for a band that you manage, is to go to our site, ldrinteractive.com, or follow us on Twitter at listenerdriven. And we work with stations around the world that do local music discovery campaigns all the time, trying to find new bands, not just local, but trying to find new independent acts that make sense to add to their playlist, that they can serve up to the rest of their audience for a kind of a taste test. So as an example, here in Canada, in Calgary, we do a campaign. For the last 4 years, we've done a campaign every year with X92.9, which is a big alternative rock station. They do a music discovery campaign where bands submit their material. You don't have to be Calgary-based to do it, but they generally like to favor Canadian acts. You submit your music, and then they throw it up as a taste test to the rest of their audience through the year. And they ultimately add most of the acts that are played as part of the discovery campaign. They'll add them on the air. They will invite them and pay for them to play at their shows through the year that sometimes include just independent acts and sometimes may include a major label act and have an independent act as part of it. And where there's one X92.9 in Calgary, we work with over 300 groups around the world. So if you follow us on Twitter, you'll learn a lot about our local music campaigns. You'll see information about stations that are turning over control to the audience. And ultimately, I would encourage you to participate in those. And I think good advice, regardless of the platform, regardless of which of our platforms you're using, it's that what we see is a high abandonment rate where most bands get, and I think this is true. This is just human nature, but many bands get distracted. So they'll fill out half of an application. They'll kind of throw their chances into the wind. And not follow through fully, but you'd be amazed at just how a bit of follow through ultimately can impact your airplay, or ultimately impact your position in getting your band further exposed and more momentum on any of our platforms. Just paying a little more attention to the best practices.
Can I ask just a question about Canadian terrestrial radio? It's been a while since I was in anything approximating the terrestrial radio business. Is it? Do you have stations that are programmed nationally, or is there enough sort of local or regional autonomy so that you have the ability to sort of, let's say, take advantage of local fans who want to make use of your platform?
Well, we work with a lot of the Bell media stations, and Bell is the largest now broadcast operator in the country. There is a lot of local and regional decision making and autonomy that happens that doesn't get dictated from the top. And one thing that Canada has that I think is a really brilliant and perhaps envious thing about the broadcast industry here is Canadian content. That 35% or more of most radio stations across the country have to play Canadian content, which we don't have in the States. And so it does afford a lot more opportunities, and it forces, I think, the megaphone to be a little more open, because professional curators have to look for local and more up-and-coming acts.
That's awesome.
And then for Pandora, for Canadian artists and managers and labels?
Yeah, I think the number one thing is to submit your music to Pandora if it's not already on Pandora. I think right now we've got more than 120,000 artists currently have their music on Pandora or comedy. And we've got slightly upwards of 70 million active listeners over a 30-day period. So we've got an audience of scale, and the potential for discovery and exposure is huge. And it's there for emerging acts, relatively unknown acts, well-known acts. It's there for artists that don't have a home on terrestrial radio. So if you're have maybe been displaced somewhat from traditional types of radio, like maybe new age solo piano, or some types of jazz or classical music, or things like this. Even if you make instrumental hip hop beats, there's a home, there's a format for you on Pandora that's got hundreds of thousands of listeners, over a 30-day period. So I think that's probably the main thing is get music on Pandora if it's not already, and from there, if it is on Pandora, share your station with your fans so that you can build momentum around essentially your little mini radio format on Pandora.
And do you have advice as to what not to do? Are there any just do not do's for the three platforms?
I mean, in general, we would discourage people from uploading things they don't have the rights to upload. I would say that's the big one.
Okay.
Don't name your band after if the band name is already taken. Consider it a different name. One of the things that we work as music librarians, and we're constantly sort of trying to make a very messy world of metadata clean as possible. So I can't necessarily list all the best practices right now, but just think about how you use metadata and how accurate it is, and sort of what some of those things might be. So yeah.
So shitty metadata is not good.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
That's
Also, I can't see if there are questions, so please do say something if you have a question. Two questions. Gentleman there? Yeah.
Yes, I'd like to know, somebody was talking about the idea of on the aggregator. What is the best way to go with you?
To get into Pan. So the question is, what's the best aggregation method?
The question is it better to go through aggregator or do it yourself and go one by one, including your platforms? What is the best strategy?
I would go one by one, go through our submit.pandora.com, and that will.
Is that the case from Canada though?
Well, if you know somebody, if somebody, if you know a manager or somebody who works in the States, you can get your album submitted. Somebody can submit on your behalf as long as that music is being legally distributed. So
okay, so it means that it's better, like in general also, it's better like go one by one and do like really push and follow up than like go with an aggregator and just forget it and then wait.
Yes, because right now we don't accept whole catalogs from aggregators. We sort of curate the list of content that they distribute. So the best way to do that is if you're on a label, we also approve. We have upwards of 300 labels that are approved to deliver everything to us. So that's sort of one way is to go through the label, but I would recommend doing it on an individual basis rather than going through an aggregator or distributor.
And when are you going to Canada? That's the last question.
I'm not the person to ask. We see an incredible opportunity to expand our service across the world and make it available for billions of people. We've seen in Australia and New Zealand, which is our first foreign territory, really incredible adoption rates and really, a lot of, discovery happening with the listeners there, discovering Australia and New Zealand artists. So we'd love to bring that to Canada and our service to Canada, but I'm not the one to answer whether, if and when that'll happen.
There's one more question.
I was just curious, for Pandora, do you consider it a beneficial or a challenging space to exist, I guess, between the songs and audio model? It's kind of on the radio curation. It's also then on the it's I guess on the radio side or the selection side. And I find sometimes, for myself anyway, a little bit of confused understanding about which way it leans more specifically. I think today you're saying that it leans more on the curation on the songs and model, if I was to generalize. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think I'm not sure I fully understand your question, but let me just take a stab at it. So we're solidly a radio service, and we see actually streaming services, on-demand services, as complementary or coexisting. We think is actually a great thing that they exist because it gets people engaged and actively enjoying music and connecting with music, and that just makes for a healthier ecosystem. So to the degree that people can go to their service of choice, be it Pandora or some other service for radio, and then also have an on-demand service. Fundamentally, I think that's a healthy thing. And some people prefer to curate, song by song, their own listening experience too, and that's fine too. So I think there's, there's plenty of room for healthy coexistence and sort of complementary.
And I guess, is Pandora trying to be both in this circumstance?
No.
Okay.
No.
There was one more question here in the front.
Just some clarification. My name is Dimitri Vitsa from StoryAmp. I live in the United States, and since there seemed to be kind of that silence about Pandora when you were asking about who's on it, in the United States, I believe I've heard that Pandora, if Pandora was a radio station, it's the largest radio station in terms of listenership in the United States. So, and is one of the, I think, the single radio outlet that has more listeners than anything else. I'm not sure what the exact percentage is, and it's growing. So in terms of its importance for breaking into the US market and actually having something you can actually do that's, at least just submit it, it's pretty important in the US market. Pretty much anyone that has a computer that likes music has tried Pandora, and they may move on to something like Songs or Spotify or something else as well, but the ones that want ease of use, they just turn on Pandora and they turn it on every day and they listen to it all day during work and all that kind of stuff. So it's a growing thing. But as somebody that's involved with PR, StoryAmp is a publicity platform. I have a question. Is there for Michael? Is there any curation element that's pitchable by publicists or record labels? I mean, you talk about the ingestion. I understand it's human curated in the sense that you've got the thumbs up, thumbs down to the fan base, but you've got this whole middle entity of people at record labels and PR firms and so forth who are like, well, how do I get some better placement in all these places? And they can do it. And YouTube has featured music page. You can actually pitch some people at YouTube. iTunes have editorial staff that you can pitch. Does Pandora have anything like that?
We do. We have on my team a small group that focuses on artist and label relations, as well as a small group that focuses on programming. And those two teams work in tandem to make sure that we're having good relationships with artists, with labels, with PR people, and that we understand what they value and what's important to them. And we also know that they have a wealth of expertise that's good for us to learn about and sort of exchange in. So while we can't always apply what they suggest, it's good information, and oftentimes we can do things, particularly in the realm of our genre listening, which is a substantial piece of listening on Pandora. This is one place where we can take input from from labels and managers and publicists, and we can listen to their suggestions and test songs and see how they work. Ultimately, the listeners will sort of determine whether something succeeds or fails, but we've sort of sought out and sort of received curatorial assistance from our partners.
Benji, can I ask a quick question of Isaac too? Isaac, I'm just curious, what are some of the most exciting, interesting, unique music strategic partnerships that you've been involved with YouTube, or that you see coming down the line? And maybe what are some things that you wish you could see happen with partnerships with YouTube?
Well, we have deals in place with many thousands of both independent and major labels and distributors. I think that's pretty exciting. We've when YouTube was launched as an open platform, there was a perception that we were a haven for piracy, and using Content ID, we've moved pretty dramatically away from that, which has been really exciting for us. I think in the last 2 years we've gone even further, and hopefully we're perceived as, in addition to being a great platform for promotion, also a very real source of revenue. And so our most engaged partners tell us that we are, in some cases, the #2 source of digital revenue behind iTunes. And so what I tell our partners, or even our prospective partners, is that if we're not in that position for you, then that's just representative of what the opportunity might be. So I would say to everyone in this room, whether you're a YouTube partner or not, if YouTube is not in your top 5 sources of digital revenue, then we have some work to do.
One of the things that's interesting is a lot of artists will say, if I put my music up on YouTube, I'm giving it away for free. If I put my music on Pandora, I'm giving it away for free. If my music is streamed, it's free. Now we know that isn't true. We know that there is monetizable revenue from advertising, and so there is money in there that's being collected from everyone. So a lot of artists have a real hard time with that. I mean, literally last night I was peppered with questions about, how do you make money in music? How do you make money in music? And the majority of artists, labels, etc., still don't see this as viable for them. Any comments, thoughts on, I mean, the YouTube thing I think is different because there are different routes to it. Companies like Audium, which Jeff Price is running, is looking to monetize certain parts of the YouTube income stream, but it's not giving it away for free.
No, I mean, Audium are a partner of ours. There's the tools that facilitate monetization on YouTube are available to all of our partners, both on the label and artist side and on the publishing side. And as I said, we pay out hundreds of millions of dollars to the music industry every year, and a substantial portion of that is to independents. And so again, if we're not generating revenue for you, then it just is representative that there's an opportunity for us to do more.
Yeah.
Pandora licenses its content through a statutory model, and on the performance side, on the master recording side, an organization called Sound Exchange in the U.S. distributes the royalties for the use of the masters. And one of the cool things about this model is that almost half of the royalties that we pay to Sound Exchange, that non-interactive services pay to Sound Exchange to license the use of the masters, goes directly to the artists without going through the label. And this is particularly compelling, especially for DIY artists that happen to own their own masters and sort of have their own sort of 360 thing happenings. You can see some of these artists getting material spins and generating a good deal of income through the use of the licensing of their
yeah, I guess what so again too is a lot of artist strategies will be to send out a link to their YouTube video, and I know that there was an artist in particular in the States who would put a link to a Pandora station that they go to my Pandora station, and that they'd seen really good revenue come from that. And but there's still, I mean, last night I was being asked by artists and labels, continuously, but it's giving it away for free. I know that Canada, in terms of, you know, SOCAN, RACs, the types of collection organizations that this country has are pretty phenomenal in what they're able to do. And still, there were artists in the room putting their hands up saying, I'm not part of that, I haven't done that, I haven't signed up for that. And there's this huge perception that when you get into this world of streaming, curated radio, individualized radio, and just general YouTube, that there won't be income. Do you think it's because these industries have not told the general artist base that? Do you think it's that labels don't want to listen? Do you think it's that we're obsessed by, we have to sit there and sell physical units and digital units?
Part of it is education, and that's part of why Michael and I do these panels, is to make sure that everyone is as aware of what those opportunities might be. But the truth is that it was when I started in the music business in 1994, in the certainly the pre-YouTube era. It's hard to be an artist, and overcoming those challenges is something that is still hard. But from an opportunity perspective, services like Pandora or YouTube or any number of other digital services represent a very fundamental democratization of that process. And so, as I said earlier, the opportunity for independence is greater than it ever has been before. And I think YouTube is at the forefront of that opportunity.
I don't think there's any reason that you shouldn't, I don't think that's a reason that you shouldn't participate in any of these platforms, because ultimately, you know, again, going back to the discovery versus momentum analogy, if you're, as a band, you're really just trying to plant 1 million seeds and see where you can blossom, I think. And I think being a part of shareable platforms where fans can bring other fans to the table is the best marketing you can buy.
So here's my question. So it's the best marketing you can buy. What does it lead to? One of the questions that I always boil it down to is well, I played in a band for 15 years, and I was touring all over the world, and the only thing I could ever get physically into my bank account of size and scale to keep me doing that was iTunes checks, CD sales, and T-shirts. And again, certain labels who have money behind them and can push. There's a bit of push that can be had there, can utilize these things to get up to that next level there. But how do we get from this level, on the ground up, how does discovery benefit 4 sweaty guys in a band who've got 12 hours to drive to another province to play a show? How does that, how would you guys take that and grow it?
Well, the way that you ultimately got that momentum and got the benefit of those sales was to go in a sweaty van from city to city. And now I think what all of our platforms offer is maybe, I don't know if it's less sweaty van time, but it certainly is more efficiency in getting your band exposed to a greater number of people without having to drive the analog experience.
Because the interesting thing is that when I look at digital platforms, they all still link. That buy button still goes to iTunes, still goes to Amazon. And there is, there was experimentation with putting direct to fan in. I know that Beats, for example, is planning on putting in, literally stores within the streaming services. Do you see that as a viable model? I'm talking about just nuts and bolts. So band is trying to get the most eyeballs to buy their music so they can go to that next level.
Yeah.
We were talking about it, but like what kinds of numbers in click-throughs to those next phases do you see as making an impact? Or should they force as many people to their own website first to try and monetize superfans and then move to this next level of getting everywhere?
I think the best opportunity for independent artists is to work on developing their YouTube channel, because you have access to 1 billion users every month. The more users you can drive to your YouTube channel, the more subscribers you get, and there's no better way to get the word out. That doesn't take the place of getting in the van, which I think is still, there's a part of that process, the sort of fundamental part of that process that hasn't changed since 1994, and I think that's not the worst thing in the world. But the tools that are available to help facilitate that, and I think YouTube is at the forefront of this, those tools are greater than they've ever been for independence.
I agree.
I just wanted to kind of bring it back to the core of where you were kind of going with it. I mean, an artist making money. That's obviously why a lot of people are here getting educated. And I think that all of these pieces are really key. But I wanted to maybe ask Benji, how do you see PledgeMusic tying into them? How does an artist make use of all of it at once without their head exploding?
I think your head has to explode. I mean, it's a hard. I'm sorry.
No. One of the things to me, I have a gut reaction to all this stuff, right? I did this in a van for many, many years. For me, it was MySpace early on. MySpace was the quickest, fastest, surest way for me to get to people. I could say, we sound a bit like Jack Johnson and Counting Crows and Black Crows, and I could sit there and I could find those humans, and I would send them an iTunes link. And I'll just an anecdote here. I was at a show in 2001, and a drunk guy comes up to me and he gives me 10 single-dollar bills and said, "I love your music, I want to buy a CD." And I said, 10 singles, are you a stripper or a bartender? Why the singles? And he said, no, I'm going to burn it. 5 of us are going to share it. And I sit there and I say, right, and this was happening at a club in Boston in the Middle East. And he had no concept that that was $50 out of my pocket. And I tried with all of my heart and soul to think that it wasn't $50 out of my pocket. I tried to think to myself, he's going to share it, he's going to come to shows, he's going to, he'll participate in some other way. Cut to iTunes launch. And I remember going, a similar drunk guy coming up to me saying, "Oh man, I love your music, I can't wait to listen to it, to buy it on iTunes." Fantastic. So that's $6.33 in my pocket because I went through CD Baby aggregator, and I'm not going to drink that tonight in cash at the bar. And there's no breakability, there's no physical product to have to actually manufacture. Awesome. Cut to 2000 and about 11, 12, I can't wait to listen to your music on Pandora. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, none of these equations have been wrong from the start. But one of them, not to single out Pandora, but let's say it was YouTube, or let's say it was any other radio station, none of them are actually going to get me from my show with my 4 bandmates home. I created an entire business to try and solve that issue, but what I really want to get to is that I never viewed the overall digital platform strategies as not complementing with the two. But the other thing I always had to juxtapose it with was, if I spent 4.5 hours a night on MySpace, or 4 hours working on my YouTube channel, or 5 hours telling people about my Pandora station, that was time better spent than bartending, which was my other alternative, where I was just doing it solely to make money. And you have time when you're in a van. We've got cellular now to do all this stuff in real time as it's happening. So your head will explode, but it'll explode far faster if you're not taking advantage of the channels, I think, than if you are. And one of the reasons I was asking about that direct-to-fan commerce is, 90% of a lot of artists' income in their sales of albums is coming in the pre-sale. And the majority of the times, if you're listening to music on any one of your channels, you will not know that there is something happening. Do you see that there's any opportunity there to be grasped in the kind of, you're listening to something, there's a new album coming. Like, how do you push that message through?
Well, most definitely. I mean, I've always kind of been in I'm the media industry person here versus the music industry perspective, I think. But the media industry, I think we've always, in radio, TV, etc., focused on the top of the funnel in terms of reach and discovery, and we've probably missed a lot of opportunities as an industry to work with music to move people down through that funnel, to go from, you like that experience, so now here's an opportunity to be a bigger fan. And that's our company is really positioned to move more people through that funnel into sharing, into ultimately purchasing music. But it's certainly, I don't know that any service is the be all end all.
The ultimately purchasing.
Right. That's the problem. Right.
Because what I'm trying to get is that ultimately purchasing. I was reading in the back of what was the band Wilco was before it was Wilco? Uncle Tupelo. So I'm reading there. They survived on T-shirt sales back in the day because you couldn't make CDRs. You couldn't do those. It was still, you had to have a label doing it. And even on the indie level, a lot of these weren't making a living. And then you'll see YouTube stars who will emerge. And then they have this kind of like this groundswell. What does that equal in the physical world, as it were? Like, how does that move? Because I think that what a lot of the feedback I get when artists ask me is, I see the potential of billions of users. I see 70 million users on Pandora, right? And all of them are there because they're fans and they want to listen. But how does that land in the offline world so that the nuts and bolts of making it as a small artist, a medium artist, or a big artist not so much because that's a different paradigm, but the small to medium, how does it work for them? Is there anything that you've seen that has just been like, that is the most ingenious use of this technology ever?
To be clear, I think we're already doing it. And like I said, our most engaged partners tell us that we're right behind iTunes as a source of very real revenue. So the answer is not a buy link at the end of a YouTube video. The answer is YouTube. YouTube is the one that's making that's making that revenue that keeps the band on the road. Now, I think that there's always room for improvement. We continue to improve our ability to sell the advertising that runs against your videos. And I think that will continue to grow, and it'll make it easier and easier, but I think YouTube is the answer.
It's encouraging for me to see this an upward trajectory on vinyl sales. Vinyl being coupled with a thumb drive, or creative things like this. So that just sort of comes to mind in light of this conversation, and then seeing how independent artists or unsigned artists, such as Trampled Like Turtles is a good example. They submitted their music to us. They were touring, they were working their asses off. They had a song that organically found its way onto a Mumford & Sons station. And I think part of the momentum was YouTube out there in culture as well. But that placement, they got a song that started to get played and heard by millions of people. And you look down their comments on their band page on Pandora and on YouTube, and you can see, oh my God, I heard your song on Mumford & Sons radio. I can't believe it. It sounds great. So it's part of this sort of ecosystem that's happening. I think it needs to the purchase and the sale of music is still fundamentally viable, and it's there. It's not going to be what it used to be ever, though.
Question.
Questions?
Please.
Yeah, I have a question for you, actually, Isaac. So you mentioned that YouTube is the #2 source of income for some artists. So can you speak a bit about what those people are doing right or differently than those of us who maybe aren't finding that much success?
Speaking broadly, they are engaged in the platform, and so they're driving as many viewers as they can to their channel. They're driving subscription. They're optimized. So on the back end, there's a variety of policies and settings that you can tinker with. The partners who are sort of all in for YouTube are the ones who do the best. So I would encourage everyone to download the playbook and to really dive into growing your channel and getting as many subscribers as possible. As an example, I have a label that I work with out of New York called Ultra Records, who are a big EDM label. And they're a relatively small, from a staff perspective, they're a relatively small label. There's a tiny office in Chelsea with, less than 20 people. And they have something like 1.8 million subscribers, which is pretty amazing. And you've seen their independent artists be propelled into the mainstream. Part of that is great timing, as the sort of EDM moved also into the mainstream, but YouTube was really a fundamental part of that success. And it led them to drive not just their record sales, but also sort of Ultra as a lifestyle brand. I think that those are lessons that all labels, whether you like their brand of EDM or not, those are lessons that all labels would be wise to take heed of.
Cool. And last question?
Yeah, a good question for you. As an artist, if we can upload some stuff through your channels or your services, how do you work the right for the artist? Do we give you rights because we upload some stuff on your platform, or we keep the right?
Sorry, was that for me?
Yeah, for everyone.
That was PledgeMusic.
No, for rights, yeah.
Whatever rights that you have, you retain, no matter if you're on Pandora or not. And I think that's mostly because of the statutory model that we operate under. But that's the situation with us.
Yeah, we don't ask artists to forfeit any of their rights. The stations that we work with or the broadcasters that we work with are still obligated to pay royalties under their typical license structure.
Yeah, I don't know if there's something that I would wave a magic wand at to change. I think that there's a lot to improve, and I think we're doing collectively as an industry, we're doing a lot to improve what the experience is like for artists and for labels, to ensure that people can become successful. And I think the increased democratization of the music industry, the ability for unsigned artists to become wildly successful in a mainstream way, in a way that transcends national borders, is pretty revolutionary. And so I feel like we're just on the cusp of a really exciting time in the music industry. I know it's been. I mean, I felt. You know, right around 2000, 2001, I remember watching my CD sales shrink really precipitously, and it was a super scary time because not only were we making less money, but we couldn't even plan. We didn't even know if we were going to ship 50,000 records or 5,000 records. And it feels increasingly like, if nothing else, we're on surer footing, so we can plan. And I think that's pretty encouraging. It doesn't mean that it's going to be easy for independent artists or even mainstream artists, and we'll never have a magic wand, but it feels like we're heading in the right direction.
So I want to thank our panelists, Isaac, Daniel, and Michael. Thank you for listening, and come say hello.